Hi everyone, Helen Blunden here. Hope you're happy, healthy and well. It is time for a new book review where I share some life lessons out of books that I have been reading. Today I want to share my thoughts of this book, Winter in Sokcho by Elisa Shua Dusapin. She is an author who is half Korean, half French. And this book was translated from French into English. It was originally published in 2016, and given that I have been reading all of Elisa Shua Dusapin's books this year, and all of which I have reviewed here on the channel, I've loved her writing, but I thought it's best I go back to her very first book and see what it's about. If you've not read her writing before, I strongly recommend you do. It is quite evocative. She writes beautifully, and especially for a language that was translated from French into English, sometimes you feel as if that something's missing or the context is missing, but not the case in her books. All her books are immediate. It gets you into the theme, it gets you into the storyline, and you can start to picture the characters and what they're going through, simply because the type of writing instantly immerses you into the scene. Now, many of her books are all in locations that are quite intriguing. They're not places we know much about. Usually places in Korea, places around bounded between North and South Korea, places like Vladivostok in her recent novel. And so these places still have a mystique about them because we don't hear about them. But in her books, given that she has lived in the area between North and South Korea, as is mentioned here in this book, Sokcho, which is very near the border in Korea, near the demilitarized zone, you get to kind of experience that location as she talks about it. And if you're someone like me who also uses books and the reading experience to then search on YouTube and look at videos about the locations that she talks about, and then reads about them and watches the locations, and you come to understand the type of mood and the type of place and the type of surroundings and the scenery that she's talking about in here. As I mentioned, Sokcho is a place near the border of North and South Korea. It is a beach town. It is quite touristy during summer, but it is winter in Sokcho, and so winter seems to denote a place where people are waiting for the summer months. People are waiting for the tourists, and we come to understand that Sokcho is a place that the Koreans go to for their holidays, but not so in winter. Winter, it is very, very cold. There's not many people, and so it's a place where time kind of has stopped. And so we get introduced to I was going to say Natalie, but Natalie's in Vladivostok Circus. See what happens when you're reading all the same author's books in this one here. In this book, the female protagonist, who we don't really know her name, is in Sokcho, and she has this job at a guest house, and she's kind of biding time. That's how we get the feeling that she's biding time. And she's there with her mum, who is a single mum. And we learn more about this protagonist, given that she had a French father, but we don't know much about him, and neither does she. There's a backstory there that she's trying to grapple with, understanding her identity. Who is she? Is she Korean? Is she French? She's never been to France. She knows the language. She knows some part of history of France, but it's kind of like an unspoken thing with her mother. We also have a French guy, a much older Frenchman, who arrives in Sokcho to stay at this guest house, and his name is Jan Carand. So he's much older than her. It could be her father's age. She starts to take a liking to him, and he seems to be a bit of a loner. But he spends his time there in Sokcho exploring the countryside, but really also not exploring it in depth. He kind of like has an arm's length from immersing himself into the culture. It's kind of like he's there for a reason, and that is his own reason to try and find meaning into his life. He's a cartoonist. He draws creates comic books, and he's there to re-inspire his art or to find some kind of answer that he's searching for. And both together, they strike up this friendship. I'm not going to call it love. It's kind of like a respect for each other, but I think the girl seems to have some feelings for him, but they're not returned any kind of love match that you would otherwise think. This girl also has a boyfriend, and her boyfriend is Jion, and he is a Korean model, and he's always away working on his modeling. But at the same time, what I love about this book is that it puts you into direct contact with a completely different culture, and that is the Korean culture. What I learned in this book is that Koreans, and I'm guessing that not all the Koreans, but I guess their culture is all about, especially for females, of being able to look good and be the best of themselves. And so the females in this book, there's one particular female, all get somehow told by their society or by the mothers, like in this book, of how they should look. Facial operations and facial surgery seem to be quite a thing in Korea, which I wasn't aware. So a lot of people don't think of facial operations or surgery, facial, what are those, Botox and things like that that people do nowadays. It's kind of normalized in their culture. Also similarly is this reference to food. There is a lot of food in this book, and I had to look it up in YouTube and also in YouTube shorts about Korean foods, like their cakes called tteok and tteokguk. Sorry if I haven't pronounced it correctly. And it got me down a rabbit warren of exploring Korean food. And I thought to myself, I have got to go to one of the Korean supermarkets here and buy some of these foods that she talks about. The foods here are quite expressive in the sense that there's a lot of liquids, a lot of colors, a lot of feelings and emotions that you get around food. And the author here loves making food, but she gets irate that the Frenchman doesn't eat it. You get to understand that she's somehow trying to immerse herself into the French, into the culture, to learn more about him in order for her to understand more about where she comes from and a little bit about her father. But at the same time, here's this man who is, I would hazard to guess, around her father's age, and he's in Korea and he's not making an effort, and yet he too is also trying to find something about his identity or some kind of question that he needs answered in his life. We get introduced to concepts like bulimia, how this author is very into food, but also being able to live up to this Korean standard of looks and certain weight for females. An indication of, I guess, the alignment between the themes of what this author wants to learn about being in France. You know, one of the big things about this book that struck me, it was lost in translation. Now, before you say, who's the translator? And I think the translator would be the same lady who has translated all her books, and that is Elisa Higgins. And sure enough, I say lost in translation, and I say that with the meaning that it is not lost in translation. It is actually quite readable in English. But I'm talking about Lost in Translation, the movie. I don't know about you, but I love this Sofia Coppola movie. It starred Scarlett Johansson and Bill Murray, and I love the movie. And in actual fact, I thought, if you see Lost in Translation and you read this book is effectively Lost in Translation, but set in Korea as opposed to Japan. In the movie Lost in Translation, we get introduced to Bill Murray, who's an older guy. He travels to Japan for work to do a whiskey commercial, and he's trying to get to grips with his own life, and also he's not very happy in his marriage. And he meets the Scarlett Johansson character, who has a boyfriend there who's running off and doing jobs in the movie industry, but she's pretty much left alone in her hotel room and in Japan. And in Tokyo, being a very busy city, she is also isolated from others. Here comes Bill Murray, and both of them hit it off, and you see that there is an obvious attraction, but maybe the cause of their age or the cause of their uncertainty, they're both trying to come to terms with their life and what to do in their life and the people who are in their life. And yet, even though they don't take this romance to the level that we would expect that romance to go to, it does become a very heartening story of two lost people in a big city of lights and them trying to find their way. I felt that Winter in Sokcho was effectively lost in translation. All the exact themes were there. Not Tokyo, but Sokcho. The lights of Tokyo and the business of Tokyo that you could get lost in Lost in Translation. Here it was the middle of winter, very cold, and people just waiting for something to happen, waiting for summer to arrive. We had the young girl in Scarlett Johansson in Lost in Translation, and we've got the young girl here. We've got the older man, Bill Murray, in Lost in Translation. We've got the older man in here. If you recall what happened in the movie Lost in Translation, you'll actually kind of come to grips with understanding what happened here in the last chapters, and then you make your own judgment on that, just like we did in the movie Lost in Translation. So that is all I have now, and it's over to you. What do you think about this book if you've read it? What did you think about the themes of this book? Have you read any of her other books, and what did you think about them? Do you find that the themes and the alignments of the movie Lost in Translation was similar to this? What were your thoughts about this book? I'm interested to learn and find out more, so feel free to share your comments below. I make an effort to respond to everyone if I can. And yeah, let me know if you've got any other books that also have the similar feeling and writing style that Dusapin has. Thank you for listening, and thank you for watching. Bye for now.